All right, let's get started. I don't have a ton of time. Who am I? I am Jeremy Morton. I'm that guy, and also this guy. I was born in Denver at the old St. Anthony's Hospital back when it was by Sloan's Lake, and that's actually where my parents met. They met at the 7-Eleven right on the corner there at Sloan's Lake, and they actually worked at different 7-Elevens, and my dad found excuses to visit my mom's 7-Eleven. So that gives you an idea of what sort of old money you're dealing with here. Okay, 7-Eleven ancestry. So I am a historian at History Colorado, and I'm also an exhibition developer. And the latest exhibition I did is titled The 90s, Last Decade Before the Future. And when I develop exhibits, what I like to do is try to write an article to go along with the exhibit. So when I was developing the 90s last year, I was trying to think, like what could I write about? What sort of personal connection do I have to the 90s? And I remembered how my mom and I got swept up in the Beanie Baby craze back in the 90s, and I had this funny story about how we tracked down the Princess Bear. So if you remember 1997, you remember the tragic death of Princess Diana and the sort of worldwide fascination that followed her passing. What more corporation-y thing to do than to capitalize on the death of a celebrity? So that's what the Tide Corporation did, and they released the Princess Bear shortly after. It actually was the Princess Bear, not the Princess Diana Bear, but we all knew it was the Princess Diana Bear, right? With the purple regal coloring and the white rose on the chest, goodbye England's rose and all that. So with the fascination with Diana and with the Beanie Baby craze, we have these things just flying off the shelf. They're the hottest toy in the country. You can't just show up, at the mall or the Hallmark store and buy this thing. You have to figure out when they're releasing and get in line. And that's what my mom and I did. Somehow we figured out that they were releasing 40 of these bears at the Hallmark store near where we lived. So we walked over there, and it turned out we were the 39th and the 40th people in line. And that was when we knew our future was secure. And we were going to become extremely wealthy with this bear. And I still remember the dejection in the eyes of the guy who showed up next and realized he was 41st in line. And he walked away sullenly, probably contemplating where he was going to track down the nation's hottest toy. So I realized, that's a fun story, I could write about that. And maybe there's a larger story I could pull out of Beanie Babies. And that's what I did. And then this is the article I released in January called The Beanie Boom. And in that, I argue that Beanie Babies played a pivotal role in the growth of the internet. So I'm going to sort of talk about that. So how did the Beanie Baby build the internet? Well, first off, you need the internet. The Beanie Babies did not build the internet. They are inanimate objects. And Al Gore also did not build the internet. If you have to pick one person who invented the internet, I would pick Tim Berners-Lee. It was actually a lot of different people, but Tim Berners-Lee is born in London in 1955, and then in the late 80s and early 90s, he developed some of the core web technologies that build the modern internet. He comes up with some acronyms that even if you don't know what they mean, you'll recognize them. Some of you nerds actually probably do know what they mean. I do not. There's HTTP, HTML, URL. He did all that stuff, right? He invented the first website, the first web browser, the first web server. So he really creates the internet as we know it, and rather than patenting that technology, he decides to make it all free for everybody. So that leads directly to the growth of the internet in the 90s. So his inventions lead to those early web browsers like Netscape Navigator, and it makes these things accessible and usable. It makes them accessible, the internet accessible and usable for, even dummies like you and me can use Netscape, right? You don't need to be tech savvy to use the internet once you get Tim Berners-Lee's inventions. And then you have platforms like AOL that really popularized the internet, right? We all remember the whirring and the booping and the slooshing of the dial-up internet and the you've got mail. And we're all inundated with 10-hour free CDs, and we're like, that's like a lot of internet. How am I going to use like all 10 hours, right? Do I really need that much internet? So by the mid-90s, America is online. Everybody's online, including my mom and I. We're online. And a funny story about this photo. So when I was writing the article, I realized, I don't have any photos of my mom with her Beanie Babies in the 90s, or in front of a PC or something like that. And we needed photos for the article. So I remember, she has a bunch of Beanie Babies in the basement. So I contact her, I say, hey, I write this article, I think it'd be fun if we grabbed your Beanie Babies and brought them down to the museum and got some cool shots. And she's like, of course, come on over. So I come over, and she's got like 3 giant Tupperwares full of Beanie Babies when I go over there. And immediately I'm like worried about my back. I'm like, and also like, we can't fit all this in my Camry, right? So I'm thinking, let's pick one of these Tupperwares, and then we'll bring them down. So this is just a third of my mom's Beanie Baby collection. So I did say, so I said I didn't have a photo of my mom with her Beanie Baby, so I do have the next best thing. This is my mom's glamour shot from 1993. So another fad, a lot of us got swept up in, gives you an idea of what she was looking like in the 90s when we got swept up in the fad. And here's a photo of me in the 90s. I'm the kid on the right there, proudly holding up my Super Mario Kart Nintendo game for the Super Nintendo. And then my brother there on the left holding up his pet iguana, another 90s throwback for you. That's named after Iggy from Under the Umbrella Tree, if you remember that show. So when we're talking about the internet, there's really 3 things you talk about. You have the rise, the craze, and the fall. So you get this fast rise in the mid-90s, and it just shoots to become this craze, and then you get this prolonged craze. And we like to think of Beanie Babies as this sort of flash-in-the-pan sort of thing, but it was really popular from early 1996 to early 2000s. That's 4 years, That's a long time for a stuffed animal to have its grip on the nation. And then you have this very rapid fall, even faster than the rise, I think. So let's start with the rise. So there's really 3 key elements when it comes to the rise. There's the internet, which I talked about quite a bit. And then you get eBay, this sort of specific website that enables the rise, which I'll talk about here in a second. And then the most important thing the Tide Corporation did was they had false scarcity. So what they did was they periodically retired Beanie Babies, and that gave it this sort of illusion of scarcity, this idea that these things are rare, right? They're going to release these, and then they're going to be gone just a couple months later. Like, it is urgent. You need to get into the Hallmark store and secure these Beanie Babies before they are gone forever, right? These are limited edition collectibles. And so one of the underestimated things when it comes to the rise of the Beanie Baby is these things are cute, man. They're really cute. And I brought up Inch the Worm here to show, they could even make a worm cute, And then they had the tag, right? And they all had their own name to humanize them, Inch the Worm in the tag there, and then they had a birthday to humanize them more. Inch is born September 3rd, 1995. And then they had the poem, of course, Inch the Worm is a friend of mine. He goes so slow all the time, inching around from here to there, traveling the world without a care. That's cute. That's cute right there. And then also the tag lent into this idea of false scarcity. For anyone who's collected sports cards, they're valuable because cards inevitably get dinged on the corners or scratched on the front. Same idea with the tag, right? These are already limited edition stuffed animals, but how many of them had some sort of rambunctious kid rip the tag off, or even the most careful collector is going to inevitably ding the edges. I think I see a ding right down here. This inch is worthless. So they're cute, right? And so then why eBay? Why is eBay so important to the rise of the Beanie Baby? Well, for 2 main reasons. First off, eBay is really the pioneer of the peer-to-peer sale. There were online stores before eBay. Amazon was released in 1994. But eBay is the first one that really gives people who don't really want to open a store an opportunity to sell their junk to people that want their junk, So if you say I had like a Scoop the Pelican that I wanted to sell, which I probably never would because Scoop is a great Beanie Baby, but But I want to sell out. I don't have friends that want to buy my Beanie Babies, but some guy in Orlando, Florida, he probably wants scoop, right? So now he has the ability to find, what he wants or what they want on the internet. But then even more important than the peer-to-peer sales is the rating system. eBay is the first website that gives you the opportunity to rate buyers and sellers. So back then, you would have a positive, a negative, or a neutral review. So if you bought an Inch the Worm and it said it had a mint condition tag and then it showed up with a crease down the middle, like that was unforgivable, right? That warranted a negative review. You had to tell people that person was a liar and a cheat, that couldn't be trusted, right? And don't buy from them. It didn't matter if you had a royal blue Peanut the Elephant, that was the most valuable Beanie Baby, the most expensive Beanie Baby for those of you who weren't paying attention in the 90s. I saw one for $5,000 one time. But it didn't matter if you had a royal blue Peanut the Elephant. Nobody's going to buy it if you got too many negative reviews, right? And negative reviews meant a lot more back then. Like, just one or two could derail a whole empire, right? So the other reason the rating system's important is because if you remember e-commerce in the mid-90s, like, that's scary, right? Like, you're gonna send your credit card information into the internet ether to like some stranger? Like, what are you, crazy? Right? So, but because of this rating system, it enables people to have trust in the online marketplace, which is fine for the website, but you also need consumer goods to drive people to the website, and the most powerful consumer good was the Beanie Baby. I read a statistic that in 1997, 10% of all eBay sales were Beanie Babies. And they sold $41.37 million that year. So $4.1 million in Beanie Baby sales. So in that sense, the Beanie Baby is responsible for the growth of e-commerce. And that's where my mom comes in. So she's one of these early eBay entrepreneurs, right? And I see what she's doing. I'm like, whoa, she's like buying these Beanie Babies for $4.99. Then she's hawking them for $15, $20, and $25. Like, I'm sure the money was like less than I perceived, but to like a 10, 11, 12-year-old, I'm like, Mom's making bank, right? I gotta get in on this money funnel. So she grabs me up in the Beanie Baby craze. And that's when we get the craze. And there's really three elements to the craze. There's collecting, community, and crime. I mainly did that because I like alliteration, but it's kind of true. So collecting, like I said, these things are easy to collect. The Beanie Baby appeals to our sort of natural desire to save something soft and lovable. And then also collecting itself is just inherently irrational, like sports cards are just cardboard, comic books are just magazines, and action figures are just pieces of plastic. We assign collectibles their value through our desires and our interests. And in the mid-90s, we decided Beanie Babies were worth collecting. And that's when you sort of need a community to talk about this stuff with, right? And with the rise of AOL, we got these online forums where we could discuss our interest in Beanie Babies, and more importantly, protect ourselves from the crime, right? And that gives you an idea of how crazy this craze was. Like, it spawned a whole black market, There were sort of forged checks and fake auctions and knockoff Beanie Babies with wonky snouts and dull eyes, right? So you got to go back to your community so you don't get ripped off, right? You don't want to buy a reissued Beanie Baby that doesn't have the right pellet in it, as an original. So this is a funny story I came across when researching the crime element. So there's a woman in Florida, of course, and she posted all these fake auctions with Chili the polar bear. This is one of the McDonald's Happy Meal polar bears, it's Beanie Babies, so real valuable. So she actually never, sent Chili the polar bear. She used that money for home repairs. And then there was also a guy dubbed the Beanie Baby Bandit who snagged 200 or more Beanie Babies in a single heist. Right? So there's this whole crime element. And then this gives you an idea of the craze, right? This is a mall, I think in Texas, right? Because the cowboy hat. This is This is a Beanie Baby auction, and that's a pretty packed crowd for a Beanie Baby auction. I think I see a couple Princess Bears up front there. And then this is the most famous of the Beanie Baby photos. Some of you are probably familiar with this photo. This is a couple in divorce court. Yeah, so they needed the supervision of a judge, right? They needed litigation, for them to divide up their priceless objects. I can't really tell which Beanie Baby she went with first. I think it might be a Humphrey the Camel. But it gives you an idea of how crazed we were for these Beanie Babies. And here is a photo of the Beanie Baby craze in Denver. This is at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game in 1998, and the giveaway was Glory the Bear. And we actually have a Glory the Bear in the History Colorado collection. So there is a Beanie Baby in the History Colorado collection, and it's not easy to add things to History Colorado's collection, especially modern things. So it gives you an idea of how important this was. Glory the Bear was deemed worthy of the History Colorado collection. We have over 20 million things in our collection, so we have this whole rigorous system to determine what's worth adding to the collection. So I say all that to say, please don't come to our museum and drop all your old stuff on our porch, right? We get those calls a lot of like, I found some old newspaper. No, we don't want it. We don't want it. But we do want a Glory the Bear, along with its commemorative card here. So, it's valuable enough. This was the most valuable Beanie Baby in my eyes, because I loved three things as a child. I loved Denver, I loved sports, and I loved collecting things that most people thought were worthless. So, so I was like, yeah, Beanie Babies, obviously, we're collecting these things. And that's me recreating a scene from me in peak Beanie Baby mode. So I had what I'm pretty sure was undiagnosed ADHD. So I'm like laser focused on getting all the Beanie Babies and becoming extremely wealthy. And then I abruptly, very suddenly changed my mind, and I decide I would actually like to create a terrarium with as many reptiles and amphibians coexisting peacefully as possible. And the only way that I'm able to do that is if I sell my Beanie Babies, right? So I think, I'm going to go on the corner and I'm going to sell my Beanie Babies. And I could probably sell some of my mom's and my sister's Beanie Babies as well. So I go to them and say, which ones don't you want? I'll sell those. All I need is a 10% cut. And in hindsight, that was a terrible deal for me for doing all the work. I should have got at least 20%. And I should have known something was up like the second they agreed to it immediately. But I made $150 that day, which was just enough money to start a terrarium. And I did that at just the right time, because it was 6 months later, all of a sudden these things were totally worthless. So I was like, I wish I had had the same foresight with my pod collection. But yeah, I bailed at just the right time, and just like any boom and bust in Colorado's history, some people cashed in at the right time and other people were left holding the bag. There's a lot of different reasons for the fall, but I identified three. At this point, there's just sort of an oversaturation with Beanie Babies. It's been going on for nearly a decade, and there's so many Beanie Babies to collect. They aren't easy to collect either. You can't just, store them like a comic book or a card or anything. So people are just fatigued with the whole thing. Also, their retirements become repetitive and predictable. It's like, they're going to come out for a month or two, they're going to retire them, but then they're going to reissue them a year or so later. And also, we're just not seeing the profits that we were promised when we started our Beanie Baby collection. But I think the most important reason was that there was no sort of cultural significance to the Beanie Baby. When we think about collectibles, what makes them valuable is really the sort of cultural linchpin they're tied to. People don't like baseball cards because cards, they like baseball, the sport, right? So with Beanie Babies, they were really just in and of themselves. They were collecting Beanie Babies for the sake of Beanie Babies, and because there wasn't this larger tie-in, it made it easier for people to give up their Beanie Baby collection. And my mom, some people held on. Some people held on, and my mom held on for quite a while. And I want to finish by reading a little bit from my article here. It's easy to look back and trivialize Beanie Babies, even to mock the people who built an entire economy around buying and selling those beanbag animals. But it's no exaggeration to say that Beanie Babies normalized the online marketplace for thousands of people. The Beanie Boom accelerated the growth of the internet and made thousands of people comfortable with e-commerce, mom and me included. I'm sure shopping on the internet would have become popular even if the Thai corporation hadn't captured our hearts and wallets. But the fact is, they did. As a result, the history of online shopping will forever and inextricably be linked to the rapid rise and abrupt fall of Pinchers the lobster, Waddle the penguin, and Chocolate the moose. For mom and me, Beanie Babies came and went like a candle in the wind. But their footsteps will always follow there along Littleton's greenest hill. Their market burned out long before their legend ever will. And my mom held on long enough for her Princess Bear to get into the 90s exhibit. So that's her proudly posed next to her Princess Bear. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Right in 20 minutes!
I know, that was amazing. Incredible work. Okay, you want to do a picture?
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna do one more picture and then we're gonna do questions. We're gonna do a picture in a second. Yeah, but we'll take care of it, but David's gonna run questions.
Jake. I'm Jake. Do it.
Oh, we're doing it now. Woo! Okay, on the count of 3, say, I will never sell stew. 1, 2, 3.
I will never sell food. Thank you. Thank your talk. Thanks for the inspiration, Alex, on that. That was rapid fire, man. I know, it was like 28 minutes this morning.
You know what, when you get on stage. All right, we got time for, I think about 4, feeling 4. Bam!
Please tell your mom I said hi.
Will you tell your mom she said hi?
You can say hi to her right now.
All right, that one doesn't count. Let me see your hands. All the way in the back.
What was your favorite Beanie
What was your favorite Beanie
Baby?
Baby? Favorite.
My favorite Beanie Baby, I think, was Glory the Bear because it tied it to the All-Star game. But I think cuteness-wise, it was the chameleon whose name's escaping me. Yeah, was it Iggy as well? Yeah, so they had this sort of rainbow chameleon one that I thought was really cool, and I was a big pet guy, the whole terrarium thing. I did have a pet chameleon as well named Shaky Jake.
How did your area work out?
Oh, it worked out great it worked out great. I had flat-tailed newts, fire-bellied toads, I had salamanders, and the emperor newt. That was my favorite. But then one day I found a toad near an irrigation ditch, and I was like, oh, a toad in the terrarium, and then I woke up in the morning, the toad had killed everything. Except for a hermit crab, but the hermit crab, was sort of hunched in the corner. I was like, okay, maybe they're fine. I came back from school that day, and he had ripped the legs off the hermit crab, and then the hermit crab sort of walked to the water and just drowned itself.
So I'll repeat the answer for that one real quick. I'll repeat the answer. It's doing great today still. Don't worry about it. All right, we got like 1 or 2 more because I ate your time. In the back on the right, or my right.
What's your least favorite Beanie Baby?
What Beanie Baby fucking sucks?
This is actually, there's an answer to this.
Go on.
So it's the End Bear. The End Bear was released right at Y2K, and it was this black bear. And they claimed that they were going to retire all Beanie Babies forever. And then people sometimes blame the fall of the Beanie Baby on that specific bear because they say they felt like they were lied to because like 3 months later they're like, actually, Beanie Babies are continuing on. So yeah, the End Bear. My mom has one still.
You got time for one more? Let's do one more. I saw you in the middle.
How much is Glory the Bear worth now?
How much is Glory worth now?
Well, you know, the one in History Colorado's collection, we're not allowed to put prices on. Priceless artifact. So that's priceless, that one. I don't know, I think it's probably like $20. I bet you can laugh at it. The one in History Colorado's collection, no priceless.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break. Actually, Nikki's going to grab the mic and say all this again. Thank you so much.